guys, it's Charlie giving you Fridays slash the weekend video. Hope you're very well. And so I've titled this one, This is What Goes On Around the World with Traders, something like that. And I've always talked about how traders will blow up, not just blow up their accounts, but traders all around the world. They won't necessarily use stops. We've talked about that recently with the oil market, so I've got the oil market chart up here. They won't necessarily use stops. They will just put positions on, and you've got to bear in mind some traders are not very sophisticated, and they're not highly educated as traders. So they've learned enough to be able to trade, place trades and stuff, but they're not necessarily as sophisticated, and so they will just trade basically on their emotions a lot more. And I was given this as an example. I'm going to drag it across now. I was given this as an example literally this week, and so let's just have a look at this. And this was obviously on a bulletin board, but I was handed this by someone this week, and this was by someone who's said, look, I went long on an oil ETF, the USO, that would have been on last Friday afternoon, after oil took a huge hit Friday, thinking it would recover. I had $175,000 position. He's American. I'm looking at it today, and it's at $1,885. I've lost it all. I'm not sure where to go from here. It was extremely risky and stupid, and it was my life savings. I'm 28 years old. I make 45k a year. Most of that money was from an inheritance. Not sure where to go from here. I have proof of all the trades. This hurts. I also have a baby, and all that sort of stuff. So I was greedy and tried to increase my money, and instead lost it all. Okay, so I mean it's actually quite typical of what goes on around the world. I hear the one thing that's been or many things that have benefited me over the years from having Easy Trader is that you do come across many stories like this. Not always 175,000 position like that, but it might be someone who's done something similar with 10,000 or 20,000. So it varies as far as the amounts are concerned, but you hear these things, and I've come across them so many times over the last sort of since we had a Easy Trader since 2002. So the last 18 years. I've heard many of these stories. So again, it just re-emphasizes what I've been saying recently about using, protection, using stops in the market, because you never know. Nothing. The market, we trade on probabilities, not certainties. So there are definitely probabilities that we can trade. But if it was certain, then we wouldn't need to use stop losses, would we? So nothing is 100%. That's why we have to use certain risk protections. So I think I've said enough now about stop losses and stuff. My little theme over the last couple of weeks, it seems, because of the moves we've seen in oil, and so let's move on, I guess, and move on to something else. I'm going to give you an example of trading from me personally from yesterday. Now, I was in our trading room yesterday, and we had I took a couple of trades with the traders in the morning, which both the trades were sort of semi-hedging one another. And so we were in a nice position. So what had happened on one of the positions, if I bring the pen up, on one of the positions, we'd got to the point which was both the positions were shorts. One was on the euro dollar, one was on the dollar yen. So the euro dollar had got down to its first target. So we'd got banked half on the euro dollar. And then the dollar yen had actually been coming down quite nicely as well. And so, actually, I'll bring up the charts. Why don't I bring up the charts rather than drawing? But anyway, so the dollar yen was doing quite well. The euro had started to bounce a bit, but we'd banked half. It didn't really matter. I'd left the stop where it was because we were trying to hold it for potentially a bigger run, which obviously didn't materialize. But what was interesting, if the euro was going to come up, and the way that the market had been moving into this point was that the dollar yen was coming down, the euro had come down, had started to bounce. So I didn't care if the euro was going to come up, then I'll get stopped out on the euro, but then the dollar yen was getting closer towards its targets down here. So we were in a really nice position. And everything was quite settled. It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. No, it was later than that. It was about 3 o'clock or more. And then all of a sudden, Bank of Japan makes an announcement about basically doing unlimited bond buying, which weakened in the moment quite dramatically the dollar yen. So if I take this back to an intraday chart of the dollar yen from yesterday, there it is. So there it was. It did enough to spike it all the way up. We had been previously short. It's been coming down. We shorted it up here somewhere in this, around about 60 or so, 107.60. It's down at sub 107.40. We were looking for it to come down to break these lows because there'll be stops building up and orders below those lows. And then this news came out of the blue. So not something which was in the calendar or anything like that. It was just one of those sort of random announcements which did enough to then just get stopped out. Now the interest, again, nothing wrong with being stopped out, but what the point I'm making with this video, and fun enough, you now see that the dollar yen is, well, still range bound, but working its way back down probably for these lows maybe into next week. But and then of course the euro that at that point then came up and stopped us out on our, because these are intraday trades, bear in mind. So stopped us out on the remainder of the euro. So then we'd got stopped on the dollar yen, made half profits on the euro, but then got stopped out on the other half. As it worked out with the risk management, we lost minus 0.3 of an R. So 0.3 of 1% if you're risking 1% per trade. So it was 0.3 of 1% actually that I'd lost there across those trades. So it was nothing. But when you're in these nice, like you say, everything's going for you sometimes, and then the market gives you a whack round the head and says, no, I'm not going to give you that today. That's where your trader mindset comes in, where what you don't want is to get massively despondent. What you've got to do is sort of laugh it off, even if it's frustrating at the time, is to sort of say, do you know what? That is just the way the market goes sometimes, and the market just when everything was looking rosy. There's no point in over managing the stop losses and bringing them all to break even, because you've got to give trades room to breathe. It's just the way it worked out. So we went from being in nice, profitable positions there, expecting to probably get stopped out on one of the positions, whether it had been the dollar yen, and then maybe the euro dollar had carried on coming down. And again, you can see that the euro eventually rolled back over. It had a spike because the news was coming out that maybe the EU leaders were going to come up with a plan with regards to the coronavirus and fiscal policy. So, but again, and then a bit later that then fell apart, so then the euro rolled back over. So just a great example of one of those days where it can be frustrating, but maintain your trader mindset. Don't then go and start over trading, thinking, because at the end of the day, it was a marginal losing day. But sometimes when you've had paper profits, open profits, and many of you I suspect can concur with this, that it actually feels worse if they then roll back down and become a loss or a flat day. Emotionally, it can feel worse to a trader when they've been up in positions to then see it all going back down to zero, basically. Or my example from yesterday, marginally negative. So maintain your trader mindset, accept that the market will do things. The market sometimes will play up a bit like a 4-month-old puppy. Sometimes they will just play up, and just when you think that they are house trained, they'll go and do a whoopsie in the corner somewhere, won't they, on your nice fine new carpet. That's just what happens. So there you go. It's a nice little example there from yesterday, just to give you some thoughts there about, the market is the market, and whatever we do, we're trading sort of probabilities with what we're doing. But again, like I've said at the beginning of today's video, the probability is not certainties. So but you have to then just take it on the chin when these things do happen, and either laugh it off. Yes, it can be frustrating, but sort of you have to laugh it off. On a different occasion, the market can help you out. In fact, there were other things that had gone on yesterday which did help me out. I'd made a mistake. I had to confess that I was walking my dog when the euro dollar hit its first target, and I remotely used my mobile phone whilst walking the dog to close out. I didn't to access my PC, and close out. What I didn't realise was that I'd accessed my PC, and instead of closing out, all I'd done is hit the wrong button. It had removed my stop loss. Oops. Didn't really matter because I was back within half an hour, and because the euro was already well into profit at that point. But as it turns out, by me making that mistake on my phone whilst walking, I actually got another 12 pips extra profit out of the euro on that first half. So it personally benefited me. See, sometimes you get poor luck and sometimes you get a little bit of luck as well. There you go. Maybe that's the best way to finish today's video there at 10.5 minutes in. So sometimes when you think the market's kicking you in the teeth, just remember that sometimes the market will give you some nice stuff as well. Do remember that as well, because it's not all negative in the market. There's plenty of positive things that happen, but the market is there to test you constantly. It's constantly probing you, saying, "Come on, then, can I get you emotional?" Because that's what it wants to do. It wants to pick a fight with you, get you emotional, because once you get emotional, that's when you start making the mistakes. Don't do it. Try not to get too emotional. Keep the emotions on an even keel. If you don't know how to do that, we can help you with it. But anyway, enjoy your weekend. Don't get too emotional when you have a glass of Sauvignon Blanc or whatever it might be over the weekend. And I'll see you next week. Take care for now.